Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Worcester Township Board of Supervisors, March 20th, 2024 work session. Would you please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance?
Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will dispense with introductions, as I think we all know one another in the audience and up on the stage, or at least save that for our business meeting. First and foremost, does anybody have any informational items for the board tonight?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this meeting is being is being recorded for future video broadcast.
Thank you, Sean. First item on our agenda is public comment. We do ask that you limit your public comment to 5 minutes. Does anybody have any public comment for the board this evening? Seeing none, we'll move forward. This is our work session. We have one topic on the work session tonight, and it's going to be a presentation and then discussion as time allows with the Skip Back EMS. I'm going to hand that over to you, Sean, to get us started and take it away.
Yes, so maybe a month ago now, I attended a community meeting hosted by Skip Back EMS for some of the state, local elected officials, just discussing a few of the, I'll call them headwinds that EMS providers and specifically Skip Back EMS is facing in the current economy. So they've been invited as the major provider of EMS services here tonight to address the board and the community and talk a little bit about the information they shared at that meeting. I think it was about a month ago. Is that right, Barry?
2 months.
Oh, is it 2 months? Okay. All right. Well, with no further ado, then I'll invite you, if you would. I'm sorry, Dan, if you want to bring a chair up as well. I don't know who's speaking on behalf of you guys. But if you would, maybe just let us know when we should stop for a slide in here, but give us a brief presentation, and then we'll turn it over for some discussion with the board.
So two things real quick. So the first I'm going to ask on the mic is if you make sure two things. One, that you got a green light that's glowing on there. And that's better. And pull it closer to you if you don't mind, just so we make sure we get you on the recording. I could hear you just fine, but we like to get all that on the recording as well. And start, if you would, with an introduction of who you are, and then we can roll right into EMS.
Exactly. Okay, my name is Barry Evans. I'm president of Skip Back EMS, and with me is Dan Greco. He's chief of Skip Back EMS. Our organization was formed in 1982, and we were an all-volunteer squad, similar to what the fire company is right now. Since that time, we've progressed to the point where we currently have volunteers and also career staff. We've gone from roughly 300 calls in 1982 to 2,768 calls in 2023. You can go on to next slide. Again, we're primarily a 911 call. We only respond to emergencies. You can go right past that. And the next slide, too. So we have two stations. One is in Skip Back. The other one is our substation in Worcester at Meadowwood. And last year, 2,028 calls came out of Skip Back station, and 744 came out of the Worcester station. Good, you go on from there. The call volume, basically 37% is Skip Back Township, 24% was Worcester Township, 16% is Lower Salford, 8% was Trapp, and 15% was the remainder of municipalities, since we have mutual agreements with all the different ambulances. I know that one's hard to see, but the figure that we want to look at there is how many calls were actually in Worcester last year, and that was 673. Basically, our finances for last year, we took in a total income of $1.2 million. It's $1,246,000 basically. And our expenses last year were $1,229,000. Borough donations were That's trap. We can skip past trap. Uh, So our capital reserves are a critical problem that we're having right now. And one of those reasons is that we're basically breaking even and we're not able to put money into capital reserves. So what's happening is at the current time, we have about $450,000 in reserves. At the current rate of depletion of those reserves, they'll be gone in 2 years. So that's where we're at this point. Go ahead. The reason why we keep getting further and further behind is basically because of Medicare. Medicare is the single most user of our services. And in 2026, I think the next slide will actually show that, but anyway, in 2026, it was 23% of our call volume. It's currently 53%, and we're projecting by 2030 for it to be roughly 65% of our call volume. The problem with Medicare is that it does not pay us what it costs us to transport. So the average call cost us a little over $1,000. Medicare currently is paying us around $550. So every time we go on a Medicare call, we're losing money. Equipment costs have gone up dramatically since COVID. Everybody knows that since COVID, everything's gone up dramatically. You'd be hard pressed to find anything that's gone down in price. Certainly our equipment hasn't. We purchased a new ambulance in the middle of COVID. Purchasing ambulances is similar to fire trucks right now. There's a 5-year waiting on them. So we ordered one, and I think when we ordered it, it was around $220,000. It's currently up to about $355,000, and we should be taking delivery of it in May of 2025. All the other equipment has gone up equally as dramatically, up 40% or so. Go ahead, you can go on. The other thing that's happened with COVID was the fact that during COVID, no training was taking place. In particular for the paramedics has been the biggest loss area. So consequently, there have been very few new paramedics coming into the service area. And because of that, we're all been competing to keep those paramedics, and their pay scale have gone up dramatically. That's not to say that they were paid really well before, but now they're up to probably where they should have been before, but we're still finding more. We anticipate that it's going to be another 3 to 4 years before we see a surplus of medics. Go ahead. Basically, it's getting harder and harder for the volunteers to actually do anything. We currently, I would say we're about maybe 2% of the calls, maybe 1 or 2% of the calls are actually run by volunteers. The rest is administration and oversight by the officers. So at this point, myself and Dan, I know we probably put in between 30 and 40 hours a week just doing administrative work. And again, we're volunteers, so we're not getting paid for that. The question is, how much longer can we do that, and will younger people be willing to do it? My answer to that is I don't think so, but we'll have to see on that. But we estimate that we're saving about $400,000 a year due to the volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
We also call on the prison, and not that concerns Worcester that much, but the prison has been paying us the same amount of money for transport since 2012. And we're actively, aggressively trying to get more money out of them, but we're being told no. So right now, the municipality support, Skip Back last year gave us around $105,000. TRAP gave us $24,000. And Worcester gave us, not directly, but through the fact that Meadowood donates the A station, we estimate that to be somewhere around $55,000. A lot of the rates in the area are a lot higher than what Skip Back was. Right now, basically, what Skip Back and TRAP are doing, and we also just took on Perkiomen, they're paying us $100 per call as a subsidizing effort. So since we actually did this, the county came out and they're actually going to be offering a real estate tax rebate for volunteers. We haven't seen the details on how that's going to work yet, but it certainly is a good plus. Be nice if it was the school district too, but it's not. Go ahead, you can go on. So again, that's basically for Skip Back. We were asking Skip Back to increase their rate since we've been locked in at the same rate since 1992. Go ahead. We go after grants on a regular basis, but grants are kind of hit and miss. And when we do go for a grant, it's for a specific item. So we can't really throw it into the general fund to say build up our capital funding or anything like that. So although it's nice, it's not anything we can really depend on. And that's basically it. That's where we're at this point.
So, okay, so I have a couple of questions, or maybe just some, so at a higher level, so you're talking about a business model that in essence is running at a per call deficit, if I'm understanding correctly. In essence, you have a shifting demographic of calls that are being funded by Medicare that if the math is, $400 to $500 per call short.
Right.
So maybe two-part question. The first is sort of what goes into that $1,000 number that you're using to sort of say this is what we gauge what a call is. This is what the rough cost is. What does that sort of entail? I mean, I can tell you, I'm still learning.
Right.
The whole EMS model.
So
is not intuitive to me.
It's not intuitive at all. The first problem is that we spend a lot of time, well, not so much anymore, but we used to spend a lot of time just sitting around waiting. So there's the cost of being ready. In the days when we could run with volunteers, the volunteers would scramble from home, and hopefully you got a crew together, but under the current state statutes, we have 3 minutes to respond, so we can't do that anymore. We have to have paid crew available to respond within 3 minutes.
Right.
The other thing I didn't mention here is that we only get to bill for about 48% of the calls that we go out on. So I know I gave an analogy of what it would be like if a group of us went to the restaurant, and if we went to a restaurant, what would happen is everybody ordered their food, and then half the people got up and left and said, sorry, we're not hungry, we're not going to pay for that, we're leaving. And then when the bill came at the end of the night, for the rest of the people, they looked at the $1,000 bill and said, well, we're sorry, but we're only going to pay you $500.
Right.
Well, that's what we're faced with every day.
So how does that happen? So you go out to a call and then they don't need you? Is that what's...
So when we go out on calls, sometimes they just say, we changed our mind. My wife called, I really don't want you here. Sometimes we get there and it's something simple, like it could be diabetic. Okay. And just giving them simple treatment will get them back to normal, and they don't want to be transported. We do bill for what we call treat and no transport, but I think it was around $200, $250. So
right.
The other thing is we get a lot of lift assists. People call us and they fall and they can't get up. So since this area does not have police, the state police just laugh if you call them and say, can you come out for a lift assist? Right. So it falls on the EMS's shoulder to come out and do that. But there are numerous reasons why we will go to a traffic accident, and again, people don't want to be transported because they know the expense involved. And sometimes when we call we have a medical command doctor, we will call them and they will say, there's really no need for this if the patient doesn't want it. So.
But what will drive you to go? Did somebody request your presence at something like that? So
again, it's all 911 dispatch. 911.
Okay.
So sometimes it could be a passerby maybe dispatch somebody, or a lot of times it's just people change their mind, or
okay.
It's when they call 911, they don't feel good. By the time we get there, they feel fine. So they'll say, I really don't want to go to the hospital. So.
Okay. Fair enough. And then, there's a volunteer problem in general. In specific, we can talk about EMS. We've got the volunteer fire department. So in some regard, we sort of understand the need to subsidize for certain things and how you go about, we sort of conceptually understand that, but we also don't, again, we we don't really grasp it, because we're, part of what we're challenged with in Worcester is we have 4 different EMS
Correct.
providers.
Correct.
Which, again, I ask more questions, just, okay, why is there 4? And why is there, and what happens? And some of the challenges with that. And ultimately, I know that some residents are able, and I don't know if it's specifically with Skip Back or it's Plymouth or other, there isn't reciprocity if they have whatever the contract, the agreement they
their
can have with
subscription
one,
service, right.
and some are reciprocal, some are not, and I know we field questions regularly or concerns regularly that somebody, depending on what day of the week it is,
And that's part of the issue, is the fact that we're not up covering, there's certain areas of Worcester we're covering all the time.
Yep.
There's other areas of Worcester we're only covering on the hours when the A station's up. So because of that, it gets very confusing, and I can understand the people that live in this community, why they're confused, and, in their opinion, why should they subscribe to anything, because who knows? We do try to work with the surrounding ambulances. I got to be honest with you, it's not always easy,
right.
because everybody wants their piece of the pie. So,
What would you change if you could change it? Not just the economics. So I look at it more holistically and say there's a money problem, in terms of, that's, okay, but that's, there seems that there's potentially a bigger dilemma when you start talking about staffing shortages and then you start competing with paramedics, and then all of a sudden you drive cost in the wrong direction just because you're trying to keep staffed properly. And then we talk about, should there be regionalization, and where should the county be involved, and should the state? And the state, a lot of the money they put to the state police, as you were saying, it doesn't, there's no trickle down,
Right.
It's, they allocate funding and then it just gets eaten up, and they're even taking the funding off of areas very creatively, I will say. I'm on a recorded line here, I don't want to be, but they were creative in how they subsidize the state police, and there's no more.
Right, and that's part of the issue, that the can keeps getting kicked down the road, and basically what they did is, at some point in time, they made it the township's responsibility to supply emergency services, and that was ultimately their way of kicking it down the road, because now they're telling the local communities, you have to do it. It's not our responsibility anymore. So, having said that, I guess it's up to the local municipalities to figure out a way to fund it. I mean, I don't know any other way around that at this point, because as long as they keep telling us that that's the best they're going to do, and they know they're not paying us enough. I mean, it's not like, Medicaid in particular this year, which is the state medical assistance, they kicked up the rates almost 60%, which is still way below where it should be. Medicaid was paying us around $312 a call. They're up to about $600 and some dollars a call now, which is still, not making the grade, but at least it's a step in the right direction. Sure. But the bottom line is, everybody's saying, we can't afford to pay for this, and at some point in time, the system will either fail, or it's going to fall onto the local municipalities to figure out a way to make it work, and that's where we're at this point.
Okay. Lou, do you have any questions, any thoughts, any comments?
Well, based on all what you're talking about, have you reached out to Matt Bradford? Because he seems to have funding ability with emergency services and fire. He gave us fire trucks.
He's real good at coming up with grants and things like that. But again, like I said, that doesn't help us with our general funding.
Operating costs.
Exactly. Our operating expense, our largest operating expense is basically employees. I mean, our wages are by far our biggest cost. This year, we're going to be close to $1 million in employee salaries. So, that's...
You're covering 4 townships.
So at this point, we're covering Skip Back Township, we're covering parts of Worcester Township, we're covering Trapp Borough, and we're covering part of Perkiomen Township. But in addition to that, we get called into Lower Salford quite a bit. Lower Salford was originally Harleysville EMS, and then they merged with Trapp Ambulance and became Freedom Valley. Unfortunately, the merger didn't go as well as they had planned, and subsequently, they're not staffing Lower Salford as much as they should, so we get called into Lower Salford on a fairly regular basis. I think
Right.
last year, we were up there 452 times, so.
So the 4 boroughs, townships, I mean, do we all contribute somewhat equally, or?
So what we're doing right now is we're trying to get each township to put in at least $100 per call. You know, like, it's hard to, you know, I don't want to give you a figure and say, we need $50,000 because
I'm not giving,
next year it's not going to, you
I'm
know.
just asking questions, inquiring.
Yeah, so right now, we're about $100 per call from each township. Worcester's a little bit lower than that because of the amount of, I think we were, it should have been around $66,000 last year, and I figured around $55,000.
If you're stationed in Meadowood, you have a unit there.
Right,
That keeps you busy. It's kind of like
correct.
Nielsen's, they have on station down at Audubon.
Right,
So, I mean, that's a full-time job for those guys, because
Oh, yeah.
my son worked there. I already know there's a lot of activity there, so.
yeah.
Um,
So, you know, like I said, we're at $100 per call. Basically, what we're telling the townships is that it's probably going to have to go up from there because we need at least an additional $200 to $300 of revenue each year just to maintain our funding from a capital funding standpoint.
Right.
And we're way behind on that at this point, so. Like I said, Skippack Township has come in and they said they would, as we need certain things, certain capital equipment, at this point, they're willing to give us donations towards that or money towards that. And of course, the big one, nut that's going to be coming in is the new ambulance.
Right.
That's in May, so. So, you know, like I said, I don't know the exact way of doing it. I know in Worcester, the problem has always been the fact that you have so many people coming into the area. And, you know, we talked with the former township manager about how many calls it actually takes to support an ambulance in your district. And I don't know what the numbers were for last year, but you actually need to have at least 1,200 billable calls to make it financially viable to support a single ambulance.
Right.
And I don't think you were there. I think you were somewhere around 1,000.
And different townships are different densities, so you're busier more so than.
Yeah, and the other problem is we get hit all at the same time. You know?
You do.
I mean, we sit around for 3 or 4 hours and don't do anything, and then 3 calls come in at the same time. And it's like, you know, what do you do?
I understand, and if you have a car accident, then the insurance companies are paying you at that point, but it probably takes you forever to get paid back.
Car accidents are one of the lucrative areas that we have. The insurance companies for car will pay us whatever we bill.
Right.
So we're lucky from that standpoint, but that's a very low percentage, you know.
Well, we're not trying to encourage that activity either.
It's your Medicare is your problem.
Medicare is the big problem. I mean, there's no way around saying it other than that. And you know, how do you go after the federal government? I don't know.
You're not doing that, no.
You're not going to, right?
Well, you can, of course, it's an election year and they're running on more services with less taxes,
Right.
is sort of the plan. They're going to give more to Medicare, and yet
Right.
we're all going to get money back somehow. So when we figure that out, then we'll be able to fund properly. But
It's magic math. I wish I knew how that works.
so, well, I mean, I understand where you're coming from. We understand, you know, we look at it, one of the things, you know, we don't budget for that. You know, that's certainly not something that, you know, we've gone through over the last several years, you know, a very disciplined process with our volunteer fire department to get us sort of addressing some of those areas as you've talked about. So they've gone through some equipment cycles, and they've gone through some unintended, you know, as we said, the state mandates come down, or somebody makes a change at the county, and all of a sudden they got to spend $150,000 on new radios, and they don't have it, you know, and certainly getting that structure in place was a multi-year process. It was not a just one day, like, hey, well, let's just solve the problem with a check. I mean, it was about trying to say there's a lot of planning that goes into that. So certainly we appreciate the concern, and we certainly want to make sure that we're we're part of the solution and not adding to the problem is certainly our goal as well. But the but is, we don't know, we don't have an answer right this moment that says, oh, well, that's no problem. We'll just throw it into the budget and,
Well, the reason why we started this is because we don't want to come in 2 years and say, sorry.
Sure.
We're out of money. If you want us to make payroll, you got to float us a loan. That we want to avoid, because that's what happened elsewhere.
well, right, and that's happened. We've seen it in other townships with other types of volunteer services, and there's bigger questions that need to be asked in terms of whether that system needs an overhaul beyond just, temporary funding sources, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, we talked about regionalization.
Yep.
The problem with that is always, you still need the ambulances in a local area.
Yep.
So how you go about doing that in an equitable way, as you regionalize, you're going to have some areas that are more affluent and some that are less affluent, and how's that all balance out? I don't know. It's beyond my ability to do it. I know that much.
I understand that. We certainly appreciate, I know we didn't get through all the slides. I looked through them beforehand, and
Right.
Sean and I had talked. I know the plan wasn't to run through every slide entirely. We certainly appreciate, we're sort of coming up on our time. Ultimately, we certainly understand the dilemma. We'll continue to sort of noodle on it internally and sort of see how we can help.
Okay, we
ultimately.
appreciate that.
So,
We just want everybody aware so that we don't want to surprise you. Let's put it that way.
understood.
Okay.
And we appreciate that. Thanks, guys. So, as part of the work session, do we have any other business for the work session? I do not.
Nope.
Okay. And does anybody wish to make any final public comment on our work session? Seeing none, motion to adjourn the work session.